An activist in motion tends to stay in motion. An activist at rest is an oxymoron. My name is Reverend John Stanley, and this is our second show in a series called Ordinary People. Wisconsin Grassroots Network brings you Ordinary People, which is a show about ordinary people who are activists from around Wisconsin. Today we will be talking with our secretary, Sheila Plotkin. So take a cup of coffee, sit back, relax, and listen as we bring you Ordinary People Network. Sheila, can you tell us what other groups and organizations you've belonged to over the years?
Sure. I started out with a little group called the Second Saturday Progressives in McFarland. We met for obvious reasons on the second Saturday, and we started looking at village board candidates and moved on to supporting them. Out of that grew an organization called Forward McFarland, for which I built a website, which was pretty exciting for me. Out of that came Active McFarland, where we created something called Grassroots TV during the Scott Walker recall. By the way, all of those materials are now at the Wisconsin Historical Society, where we hope one day there'll be an exhibit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the Raging Grannies of Madison, where I've been a member since 2013. And Wisconsin Grassroots Network, but that's new to me. Only in the last couple of years have I been on the executive committee.
And of course, we're very glad to have you and your help, always. So I guess I would start the questions being at who is your mentor? Who's helped you get into the activist?
Right, that was Terry Spring. She was in 2000 during the Gore Lieberman campaign. She was director of the Wisconsin Democratic Party, or Democratic Party of Wisconsin. Sorry about that. Anyway, I volunteered. That was one of the first real political kinds of things that I did. I volunteered and I ended up in the office. And they were so disorganized, it was appalling. And I volunteered and I became sort of the secretary, the fielder of phone calls. I got to know Terry only later to discover she was also a McFarland resident. And she and her husband Greg were the ones who started the Second Saturday Progressives. They got me involved. And so I consider her my mentor.
So when you became involved, what was your plan? Why, what was important to you?
Getting involved in local politics, what I discovered was that people in the village didn't know the candidates for village board. They had no idea who they were unless they were next door neighbors. I mean, that's just the way it is in local politics. You just don't know those people. And they did go door to door. They had hang tags. And what we determined was, we wanted to find out what their leanings were. Were they progressive? Because the village board at that time was populated with, I would say, more right-wing types of individuals. And so we wanted to replace them. And so this group decided we would interview candidates and see who they were. And if they were good candidates, we were going to back them by organizing village-wide canvases, creating hang tags. I did a lot of that kind of work. I created the maps for the various sectors of the village. We made phone calls. I had a huge mailing list over time where I could email people and tell them we're going to do a canvas. And all of that, the first election that this group was involved in, we replaced 4 members of the village board. And that was a very successful activity. And I really understood then what it means to be active at a very local level with other people who agree with you.
So what was as an activist, what is your vision for the future? I mean, what do you see you personally accomplishing?
Well, I'm 88, John. So my activism window grows smaller by the day. But I'm also a retired teacher, and as a retired teacher, I understand the value of inspiration. So my hope is to inspire younger people to follow my example. And for an example of that is when the grannies perform. it so often happens that young women come up to us and they say things like, gosh, I wish my parents or my grandparents were doing what you're doing. But they also say, and this is my favorite, I want to be just like you when I grow older. And that is is in large part why I do what I do.
So what do you tell them? So what do you tell them? Like, how do you become a granny? And is there an age requirement? Must you know a granny? How does this process work?
The process is very simple. You have to make basically a commitment to A, come to rehearsals, and B, have no style sense. So those are the things that you need to be a granny. We are all women of a certain age. Some of us have grandchildren, most of us, I would say, but some of us do not. But we all care about the same things. We care about building a safe, reasonable, healthy world for children, everybody's children. And so that's really the only requirement. I admired the grannies during the uprising in 2011. They sang a lot, and I know several of them were arrested. I really admired them, but I didn't know how to get close to them. And then there was an event in 2013 when they were receiving an award from an association of volunteers of the year. I don't remember the details anymore, but I decided to go. And I went, and they sang, I think, 3 songs. And when they were finished, I said, this is my chance. These are my people. So I got up and I strode over to the conductor and I said to her, I know I can pass the physical. What else do I have to do to be a granny? And she said, nothing, just come to rehearsals. And she told me when those rehearsals were, and I started going in 2013. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life. I've written a lot of songs for the grannies. They brought out that part of me that was more or less private. I wrote poems and things for family occasions and that. But now that's just opened up a whole other strength that I knew I had, but I hadn't used very much.
But you didn't have to be a granny. You didn't have to be, somebody who had grandchildren. You just had to be certain age. You have to be a
certain age, and the one who shares the passion that the grannies have to make a better world, and be willing to wear outrageous colors, aprons, hats, shawls, the whole thing, lots of buttons, and stand on the street. And we're really street theater, and it's a lot of fun. We have one granny who says you're okay to be a granny if you can sing in the key of me, which is I love that. So that's the nature of the grannies, and they have supported me through a whole host of personal problems that come up in anybody's life. They are my sisterhood, and when you reach a certain age, that peer group support is absolutely essential for your mental health. And the grannies give me that. I'm still sane in large part because the grannies have kept me there.
Are a fantastic group of ladies, and of course, I love having the title of your biggest fan. Whenever I run into the Raging Grannies, they know who I am. I know who they are.
Granny groupie, John. You're a granny groupie.
Absolutely. And I have your last book, for the Raging Grannies, that they came up, and I hear you're coming up with the second book. Will that be out shortly?
Good heavens, not shortly.
Well, let me move on then to some other questions, like who is your favorite historical figure?
Yeah, good. That's an interesting question. I had to think some about that, but in chronological order, here they are. Harriet Tubman, for her fierce courage as an individual woman fighting impossible odds. I just admire that so much. And followed by Abraham Lincoln, a man against the same kind of odds. And then the suffragettes, who didn't let anything stop them from getting the vote for women. So those are the people I admire the most. There are others, but they're the ones.
and who obviously, helped people realize that women were citizens. They weren't just, these
Not
people
just
who,
citizens, but actual human beings.
yes, exactly, human beings. Do you have a favorite quote?
Yes, I do. It's Margaret Mead's famous quote. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And I believe that to my core.
So, is that something that I guess if you had words of wisdoms for younger activists, what would that be it? Or
That would be it. And to urge them to actually believe that that is true. History has shown us that it is possible for individuals to get together and make change. The history of activism, that's exactly what it is. And so, but young people, I'm not sure some young people believe that. No, you can't change anything. It's too big. You can't change anything. Just go on with living your life. But that is not true. And the No Kings protests we're having now are proof of that. That's a nationwide, and in fact international. I've seen some in Great Britain. They're having them too. And what they're saying is that if you do things like this locally, it spreads. Courage is contagious. All of those things that we're hearing these days, it's all true. I've lived long enough to know that the kind of activism, protest, whatever it is you can do, makes a difference. You may not know it. There are others doing the same thing. And that's the essence of democracy, in my opinion.
well, that's great that you bring that up, because this next question is going to be a bit to chew off. Because I've always heard you talk about the 30,000-foot view, and that's part of the question. The other part is, how does democracy fit into that 30,000-foot view, and what does it mean to you? What does democracy mean to you, and how do you, bite small bits off so that you're not trying to save the world completely by yourself?
Which no one can do. As for the 30,000-foot view, I'll start there. I avoid it because it's self-defeating. It's unmanageable. I've always thought that my responsibility as a human being is to leave my little corner of the world in better shape than it was when I got here. And to me, that is the essence of democracy. A life that's made up of doing small things that make a positive difference. I leave the 30,000-foot view to historians. They can deal with it. And I feel sorry for them now, because having to deal with it on a regular basis. And the ones I see are looking worse for it.
Oh yeah, and they have to actually, decide what the 30,000-foot view is and agree on it, or at least hide it for the future, because it's being changed daily as to what the past has been. So we've got to make sure that we have people that keep what is actually happening, and for history. So what do you feel is the biggest danger to our nation today?
I wanted to answer your other question first before we go on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes.
That's okay. It's what does democracy means to me, because that's really important to me. It's the ideals that matter to me, that we are all equal, that we have rights. Because we're human beings, we have rights, not because someone else grants them to us, that we can govern ourselves, that there is such a thing as the common good, and that our job is to figure out what that is together. Our founders, go ahead.
Have you ever read the book, The Rights of Nations?
I don't remember that I've read that one, no.
It's a good one. I just wondered if you had, because it sounds very much indicative of that book, the thoughts that you just put out.
I have learned a lot as an adult, much more than I learned in public school as a child. But one of the things were the ideals that the founders wrote on that parchment constitution and the independence. But they were flawed human beings, and we're all flawed human beings. Once in a while in the history of this country, we've mastered those flaws. We've realized those ideals. And by doing that, we've proven to ourselves and our children that such a thing is possible. And then the backlash comes. And
so is
yeah,
that is that the so what do you feel is the biggest danger to that at this time in our history?
well, I think when the backlash comes, people relapse, the flaws take over again. And democracy is the freedom to wage that battle between those flaws and our better angels. That's what democracy allows us to do, to fight that fight and figure out where those better angels are and how do we call them out of more and more people. I think indifference, I've always thought, indifference is the greatest threat to democracy, because when people shrug their shoulders, they throw up their hands, they say, well, there's just nothing I can do. That's when tyrants move in and tell you they can solve all of your problems. And you are ripe for that kind of lie.
Well,
In
in that question, there's like well, in your answer, there's another question. Then is that because we are a country where we are democracy, that there are other people in that whose views do not match our own, that their views should also be considered. How do we, you know, meet in the middle? How do we get to a point where we're really fighting for democracy and not just what we deem as democracy?
That's the hardest part, John. That's the battle that we wage all the time. And the more people are divided by media and by the goal of the powerful to divide and conquer, the harder it is to find common ground. That is why the powerful use divide and conquer, so that we cannot come together, because they have made it clear to us that we are one another's enemy, rather than they're the bad guys. And those of us fighting down here, we actually have the same purpose, the same cause, the same dreams. We all want what's good for the land, for our families, for our children and our grandchildren. Every human being wants that. I don't care where you live or what your culture is. Those are the things that human beings want. We're programmed to want that, because that's how the species survives. And what divide and conquer does is it educates us to believe that there's only one way to make all those good things happen, and we know what it is. They don't know. And not only don't they know, but they're trying to they're evil. I mean, that's what we hear all the time now. The bottom line is human beings have common ground. We've seen that in Wisconsin. When you just put forward a referendum that corporations are not people and that money should come out of our politics, even in the deepest red, which we now have, the powerful have defined for us, those people vote for that. If you separately have a referendum or an issue about the environment, about our state parks, people want that. But if you put a party label on it and you say this is a progressive ideal, or then they don't want it, because that's the label they don't trust, and that's the damage that's been done by the, what is it now, 5 or 6 corporations that own all the media in the world.
Yeah.
And they have a reason to tell us that we are enemies of each other. But that's a lie. So how do you find common ground? That's the hard thing to do. But that's what democracy will allow us to argue about. And if we allow them to take over, we won't have that freedom anymore.
So in being an activist, what skill sets do you have that have, you know, made you a better activist, or, you know, how do you hone your skills being an activist?
Basically, I've always been a good listener. That helps. And as you've already heard talk, but being organized has helped me enormously. That's just a thing that I've always needed to be. And so that's helped me a lot. And in the early 1980s, I began a love affair with computers that maintains to this day. So that helps a lot too, in terms of being able to communicate, to build websites, all that kind of, it's all learnable. I didn't know anything about computers. I didn't even know what it was when I began. But that takes time, but it's worth doing. So all of that is part of a skill set. But the most important thing, I believe, is not a skill necessarily, but it was to convince myself that I could do things that were necessary, that mattered.
In that, if you could go back,
Yeah.
because I know you're our secretary and you run our website, you're very good with our website. If there was a skill set that you could have picked up that might help you as an activist, what would have it been?
Well, frankly, it's not a skill. It's creating the confidence that if I do something that matters to me, it's going to matter to other people too. And that was a lifetime to build that belief in myself. And I think a lot of people are there. They think they should do something, but they don't know what. And whatever they do, it's not going to matter. Can't be important. You have to convince yourself otherwise. And if you can do that, then you will continue to do the things that you can do. And that's all anybody can ever ask of you.
And that's a very good point, is having the self realization that you have that power, that you have that ability to do things, and that so moving on from that, because we want to know, what are things that you've done as an activist? What have you been able to do? What has empowered you? What have you been able to accomplish?
Well, I've already talked about the things that we did in McFarland and the Raging Grannies. But then in 2015, I started sending open records requests to the Wisconsin, the Republican majority in the legislature. And I asked them to send me citizen contacts about issues that were really important. What started it was they were going to dissolve the Government Accountability Board. And I couldn't figure out who was asking for that. Naive as I was, I figured, well, they don't do it unless their constituents are asking. And I realized there's a way for me to find out. And what I found out was, no, their constituents, 98%, 95%, were against it. And yet they did it anyway. And I did that for 6 years, and I have a website called We the Irrelevant, and you can find it online, and there's 6 years of data there on, I think, about 12 or 13 different issues.
Do you want to give that the address to that website?
Yes, it's hyphenated, irrelevant.org.
Thank you. And yes, I was very impressed with the work you've done. And that's going back to the question about democracy and who is really making the decisions. It's not that we can't come to a compromise or in the middle. It's that there's people out there with their own special interests that stop, because, as you said, 95% of the constituents, and these weren't all blue districts, these weren't all red districts, these were all districts.
Yep.
So the next part of the question is going to be two parts. One is, what has been your most memorable experience, and who have you been most impressed with these experiences meeting?
Yes. Well, my most memorable experience is obviously being a Raging Granny. I received a Citizen Openness Award in 2016 from the Wisconsin Freedom of Information Council because of We the Irrelevant. I won a lawsuit against 14 GOP legislators because they refused to give me, in response to an open records request, digital records. They wanted to give me paper. And I sued them And they appealed, and the appellate court confirmed that they are required to give digital if requested. And that stands now as part of the open records law. So that was exciting. And then in 2018, a documentary was begun. It debuted in 2020, right in the middle of COVID. But it's called Can You Hear Us Now? And you can find it on Amazon Prime and a couple of other places where you can see videos. And they're a married couple, and they decided they wanted to look at 2018, which was an important election in Wisconsin and everywhere else. And I became part of that documentary. And the women who most impressed me are two of the women in that documentary, both of them running for legislative office in gerrymandered districts in 2018. And their stories are part of that documentary, as is mine and We the Irrelevant. It's really well done. And if you're looking for inspiration, you'll find it there.
So why do you think more people aren't involved? Why aren't there more activists being, active?
Yeah, right. Well, because I think it may be a combination of fear and a sense of helplessness, as I talked about before. And it also may be that they're looking at the 30,000-foot view. And if you look at that today, the only thing you want to do is go under your bed and never come out. I mean, that's the problem. And that's what the fascists want us to do. That is the purpose of this shock, the purpose of the shock and awe we're seeing now. That kind of governing is to shut us up, to frighten us, to make sure that we never do anything, because they want us to believe we cannot. But I, as one old woman, am not going to give them what they want.
Bravo. Yes, absolutely.
Surrender is not an option.
So here's the most important question on my list, and I hope that you'll appreciate it. Do you know the way to San Jose?
As a matter of fact, I do, because my son lives in Santa Clara, so I know. You can't trip me up with that one, John.
Well, I just thought there would be, I'd put one fun question on there that just was absolutely irrelevant. For somebody who has a website, We the Irrelevant, I thought you'd appreciate that.
I do indeed.
Our cuckoo is just gone off.
Okay.
So I'm going to have to, our cuckoo tells us that it is time to end the interview. So I just wanted to thank you before we left and say I appreciate your work as an activist, as a raging granny, as someone who has cared about our records and who's doing what, keeping us aware of who's doing what. So thank you for all that you do, Sheila, and thank you for taking time to answer questions on ordinary people.
My pleasure, John. Thank you.
I'd like to conclude on this note. This is a quote by Mr. Rogers. When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. And that is true. Sometimes we feel overwhelmed. Sometimes we feel down, like everything around us is going to crash all of a sudden out of the blue. We're all going to sink through the floor, and there's going to be fires and all kinds of problems because things are too big for us. We can't handle them alone. But we're not alone. There are others out there who are doing things in their community for their family and their friends, who are trying to make life better. And so when you're feeling down, when you're feeling alone, when you're feeling like nothing you can do can really make a difference, just remember that there are people out there who are helping. So look for the helpers. And that is my suggestion, my friend, as we conclude this episode of Ordinary People. Thank you and have a good day.